The death of the old self is not a gentle process. It is a dismantling of everything you thought you were. It begins quietly, often after a moment of deep clarity or a spiritual awakening, when the patterns that once defined you suddenly stop making sense. The job that once felt meaningful now feels hollow. The relationships that once gave you identity begin to lose their grip. The goals that once drove you forward no longer hold your heart. You wake up one day and realize that the person you were living as is gone. This death is not physical, but it feels like it. It shakes your foundation because your ego, the mask you built to survive in the world, starts to dissolve. And as it dissolves, you begin to see how much of your life was shaped by fear, by desire, by the need to be somebody. The achievements, the possessions, the constant striving, they were not who you are, but the armor you wore to protect a deeper truth. Now that armor is falling away. At first, it feels like loss. You feel empty, disoriented, almost disconnected from life itself. You used to wake up with plans, deadlines, ambitions, but now there is only stillness. It feels like something inside you has shut down, but in reality something deeper is waking up. The old self, with its routines and its illusions of control, cannot exist in the light of awareness. It begins to crumble, piece by piece, under the weight of truth. You start to notice how much of your old identity was built on others' expectations. How much of your purpose came from wanting to be seen as valuable or successful. And now that the illusion has cracked, those old motivations fade away. You no longer feel the rush to chase external validation. But without that fuel, you feel adrift. The ego interprets this as failure, but the soul knows it as transformation. This is the dark night of identity, the sacred silence between who you were and who you are becoming. The old self resists, it clings to what it knows. It will whisper lies. You're losing everything. You'll never be the same. You're wasting time. But this fear is the ego's final attempt to survive. It cannot understand that its own death is the beginning of your freedom. When the old self dies, the meaning you once had collapses because it was borrowed meaning, built on societal scripts, family conditioning, and unconscious survival patterns. What once gave you purpose now feels meaningless because it belonged to a version of you that no longer exists. This emptiness is not a void to be feared. It is the sacred ground where your true self begins to grow. The seed cannot bloom without breaking open. The death of the old self often brings emotional chaos. You may cry without reason. You may feel waves of anger, grief, or numbness. Every emotion is part of the purging. You are releasing attachments to an identity that never belonged to your soul. It's like mourning a life that was never truly yours, but one you lived so long that it became real. This grief is holy. It's the sound of your consciousness expanding beyond the walls of illusion. As the ego dissolves, you begin to see how you once mistook achievement for meaning, approval for love, and control for safety. The world conditioned you to believe that success equals happiness, that image equals worth. But now, those beliefs burn away under the light of truth. You no longer want to become someone, you want to be. You no longer want to chase life, you want to live it. This is the quiet revolution that begins within the ashes of the old you. There's a still point that emerges in this death, a strange peace beneath the chaos. When the noise fades, you start hearing the faint voice of your soul, one that was always there, whispering beneath the mind's chatter. It says, "You are not what you do. You are not what you own. You are not who others think you are." You begin to feel that truth, not just know it intellectually. That's when the old world truly collapses, when the inner knowing becomes undeniable. The death of the old self doesn't happen once, it happens in waves. Each time you shed a layer of illusion, life rearranges itself. The friendships that were built on your old identity may fade. The ambitions that belong to your ego may crumble. Even your dreams may die. But every ending carves space for authenticity. Every loss removes one more chain from your being. In this stage, people often mistake stillness for apathy. But stillness is not giving up, it's realignment. The old self acted from fear, the new self acts from awareness. Motivation no longer comes from the need to prove, but from the desire to express. You no longer want to conquer life, you want to connect with it. You begin to understand that purpose isn't found in striving. It's revealed in surrender. There will be days you miss your old drive, your old excitement, even your old illusions. They felt alive because they kept you running. But now you are learning to rest inside yourself. You are learning to exist without masks. That is the true freedom awakening brings, the permission to simply be. The mind will resist this at first, but over time the silence becomes home. In the death of the old self, you realize that the meaning you lost was never real. It was projected, conditioned, borrowed. The emptiness you feel now is not a sign of lack, but the natural space that appears when lies fall away. It is the soil where authenticity takes root. You don't need to rush to fill it. You don't need to create a new identity right away. You just need to stay present in the dismantling. Eventually, you begin to notice something subtle, a gentle pulse returning, not from the mind, but from the heart. It's not the old ambition, it's aliveness. It's not about chasing a goal, it's about embodying truth. You start to see that your very existence is purpose enough, that the act of being conscious, awake, and real is the deepest form of creation there is. And so, the death of the old self is not an ending, it's a purification. It strips you of everything false so that what's eternal can emerge. You lose the illusion of meaning to rediscover the essence of it. You let the ego die so that the soul can finally breathe. This is the sacred paradox of awakenings, that what feels like death is actually the first breath of real life. After awakening, you enter a strange and silent space that few talk about, the void between worlds. It is the sacred between where you are no longer who you were, yet not fully who you are becoming. Everything familiar begins to fade, yet nothing new has fully arrived. You are suspended between two realities, the life that once felt real and the life that is waiting to emerge from the ashes of your transformation. This is the gap where all illusions die and all truth begins. At first, this void feels like loss. The emotions that once defined you fall away, leaving behind a kind of hollow clarity. You look around and see that the things that used to give you comfort, your identity, your ambitions, your beliefs, no longer hold meaning. You've outgrown them, but you haven't yet found what will replace them. It's like stepping off a cliff without knowing where your feet will land. Every instinct in you wants to go back, to cling to what's familiar, but the door behind you has already closed. The void is not a punishment, it is the initiation of rebirth. The soul cannot transform without first dissolving what is false. And that dissolution is not gentle. It's a tearing away of everything that is not aligned with your truth. You begin to see the fragility of your old self, the false safety you built around achievements, titles, and recognition. You start to realize that much of your life was a performance designed to keep you from seeing how infinite you really are. Now the stage is gone, the lights are off, and all that's left is silence. In this silence, there is both terror and beauty. The terror comes from not knowing who you are anymore. The beauty comes from realizing that for the first time, you're not pretending. You are standing naked before existence. No masks, no roles, no stories, just awareness itself. The ego calls this emptiness death, but the soul recognizes it as the birthplace of freedom. The old identity collapses, and in that collapse, You begin to remember something ancient inside you, something that doesn't need to become anything to be whole. This in-between state can feel unbearable. You might wake up each day with no sense of direction. You might lose motivation, interest, or even the desire to move forward. The mind panics because it no longer has control. It doesn't understand this stillness, this pause between two worlds. It was built to survive through doing, through striving, through defining itself by progress. But the soul speaks a different language. It evolves through surrender, through stillness, through being. The gap between these two ways of existing is where you now live. This is why so many people fear awakening. They think enlightenment is light and bliss, but it often begins with disorientation and despair. You are being emptied of everything false so that something true can take root. But in the process, you feel like nothing at all. That nothingness is sacred. It is the womb of your rebirth. What you are experiencing is not the end of your story, but the pause between chapters. The page is blank not because you've failed, but because you are being invited to write from truth this time. In the void, the world appears quieter. You begin to see life without the filters of ambition and fear. You no longer chase validation, yet you still long for meaning. You are in a liminal space where nothing external can guide you anymore. The teachers, the books, the philosophies, all of them begin to sound distant. The only teacher left is silence itself. And in that silence, you start hearing the faint heartbeat of your real self, the one that was buried beneath noise and expectation. But this transition tests every part of you. It forces you to confront your deepest attachments, to who you thought you were, to what you believed you needed, to the stories you used to tell yourself about why you mattered. Without those attachments, you feel exposed, but exposure is not weakness, it's truth uncovered. The void is not darkness, it's raw light before form. It's awareness before identification. It's you before you become you. This in-between stage can stretch for months or even years. There's no timeline, no clear direction. The more you try to force clarity, the more it slips away. The void cannot be controlled, it can only be surrendered to. You learn to sit in uncertainty without needing to fix it. You learn to breathe through confusion without demanding answers. You begin to trust that the same intelligence that dissolved your old self will eventually shape the new one. Slowly, you notice subtle shifts. You begin to crave less noise. You become more sensitive to truth and allergic to anything fake. You stop seeking validation from others because the need to perform is dying. You no longer measure your worth through comparison. Instead, you start feeling a strange sense of peace in not knowing. The chaos that once terrified you becomes your teacher. You start to see that emptiness isn't the absence of life. It's the space where real life finally has room to enter. In the void, there is no map. You must learn to navigate by intuition alone. The heart becomes your compass. You begin to follow energy rather than logic, resonance rather than reward. Some days that means resting when your old self would have pushed. Other days, it means creating without expectation, simply because something inside you longs to express. You are learning to live from flow, not force. This is the language of the new world forming inside you. The old world, built on speed, achievement, and noise, will try to pull you back. It will whisper that you're wasting time, falling behind, or losing yourself. But you can't go back to sleep once you've seen the truth. The old you was a mask. The void is the space where the mask disintegrates. What remains afterward is authenticity so raw that it frightens the parts of you still attached to illusion. The void between worlds is not a mistake. It is the sacred pause in the rhythm of evolution. Just as night precedes dawn, silence precedes creation. You are standing in the timeless space where identity dissolves and essence awakens. It feels like nothing because everything false has fallen away. You are not losing your life. You are losing the version of you that was never truly alive. The universe has drawn you into this space to prepare you for the next becoming, one that can only rise from the depth of surrender. There comes a moment after awakening when all the ambitions that once drove you begin to vanish. The goals that once felt sacred now seem hollow. The dreams that once burned brightly lose their light. You wake up and realize that the hunger that used to move you through life has disappeared. At first, this feels terrifying. You wonder what went wrong, why the things that used to inspire you no longer ignite your soul. But what you are witnessing is not failure. It is the collapse of false desire. False desire is everything you chased to escape yourself. It's the craving for recognition that hides the fear of being unseen. It's the pursuit of success that masks the terror of being unworthy. It's the endless doing that covers up the silence you were too afraid to face. Before awakening, these desires gave you identity. They told you who you were: the achiever, the dreamer, the one with a plan. But awakening strips away the illusion. It exposes how much of your ambition was never truly yours. It belonged to a dream version of you, one created by fear, conditioning, and the need to belong. You were taught that purpose means striving, that happiness means achievement, that peace must be earned. So you ran after money, love, validation, attention, believing that fulfillment was somewhere out there. But the moment awareness pierces through, that belief collapses. You begin to see how much of your life was shaped by borrowed ideals, how every desire was a disguise for something deeper, the longing to feel whole again. When false desire collapses, there's a deep emptiness left behind. The ego calls it depression. The soul calls it purification. You are not losing your drive. You are losing the illusions that once controlled it. The outer ambition fades so that the inner alignment can be born. You are being rewired from survival to authenticity. But in that transition, the world feels quiet, almost lifeless, because the noise of wanting has stopped. You are no longer driven by lack. You are learning how to move from wholeness. False desire always comes from fragmentation. It is born from the belief that something is missing, that if you just achieve one more thing, you'll finally be complete. But awakening exposes the lie. It shows you that nothing external can ever fill what was never empty. When you see this truth, the machinery of false motivation stops working. You can no longer trick yourself into chasing illusions. You can't go back to pretending that external rewards define your worth. You've seen too much. You've tasted reality. At first, the stillness feels unbearable. You feel unproductive, unmotivated, almost invisible. The world keeps moving, chasing, hustling, and you feel like you've stepped outside the current. But that stillness is sacred. It is the quiet space where truth begins to rise. You are being asked to rediscover movement that comes from presence, not pressure. You are being invited to live from being, not becoming. The old version of you was addicted to progress. The new you is learning peace. As false desire dies, your inner world begins to change. The constant mental noise, the comparing, the competing, the craving, starts to fade. You begin to see how much energy you spent trying to become someone in the eyes of others. You start to feel compassion for the version of you that believed success could save them. You see that every ambition was really a search for love, and that love was never outside you. It was buried beneath the noise of wanting. This collapse is not an ending, it's a recalibration. You are being stripped down to essence. The universe removes what is false to make room for what is real. It doesn't ask you to stop desiring, it asks you to desire differently. To want not from fear but from freedom. To move not to escape, but to express. When false desires dissolve, authentic desires begin to emerge. desires that come from the soul, not the ego. These new desires don't enslave you, they liberate you. They don't create pressure, they create flow. You may not recognize yourself during this phase. The things that once defined you no longer fit. The conversations that used to excite you now drain you. The plans you once clung to now feel irrelevant. You are not broken. You are simply outgrowing your illusions. You are no longer living as the dream character you built to survive the world. You are waking up to the vastness of who you really are, and that vastness doesn't need to chase. It only needs to align. The collapse of false desire brings with it a profound peace, but that peace often hides behind discomfort. The mind will try to rebuild old ambitions because it cannot understand life without striving. It will whisper that you've lost your edge, that you've become lazy, that you no longer care. But what's really happening is that you are learning to care differently. You are learning to act from clarity instead of compulsion. You are learning to do without becoming addicted to doing. True desire feels different. It's quiet, not desperate. It arises naturally, not from comparison or lack. It doesn't come from the need to prove anything. It comes from the joy of expression. When you act from this space, your energy flows effortlessly. You create not to gain approval, but to share essence. You move not to escape stillness, but to celebrate it. You begin to understand that fulfillment is not something to achieve. It's something to remember. The collapse of false desire reveals the truth that you were never chasing success. You were chasing yourself. Every goal, every ambition, every longing was an attempt to find home within your own being. Now that the illusion has fallen, you can finally stop running. You can rest inside your own awareness and allow life to unfold through you rather than around you. The universe no longer feels like a battlefield. It feels like a mirror reflecting your own state of consciousness. And yet, even as peace grows, the remnants of the old world still echo. You might occasionally feel the pull of old desires, the urge to compete, to achieve, to prove. That's okay. It's simply the memory of who you used to be passing through. You don't need to fight it. You only need to stay awake. Every time you choose awareness over craving, truth over illusion, you dissolve another layer of false desire. You step deeper into authenticity. Eventually, you realize that the ambitions that once drove you were never wrong. They were just limited. They were the language of a self that was still asleep. Now that you're awake, you no longer need to chase dreams that belong to a dreamer. You are not here to prove your worth. You are here to embody it. The energy that once burned as ambition transforms into devotion. You no longer move from emptiness trying to be filled. You move from fullness longing to express itself. There comes a stage in every true awakening when you realize that light alone cannot save you. You've meditated, prayed, healed, and ascended. But still, something in you feels incomplete. The peace doesn't last. The motivation doesn't return. And deep inside, there's a heaviness that refuses to dissolve. This is the call of the shadow, the forgotten self that you buried long ago. Real motivation, real aliveness, returns only after you face the darkness you've been avoiding. The shadow is everything within you that your mind rejected in order to survive. It's your anger, your jealousy, your shame, your need for control, your fear of rejection. It's the pain you numbed, the tears you swallowed, the truths you couldn't bear to see. You learned to wear light as armor, pretending to be only kind, only peaceful, only spiritual. But in doing so, you split yourself in two. One half became your identity, the other half became your exile. And now, awakening has brought the exile back to your door. At first, it feels like regression. You thought you were rising above pain, but instead you find yourself drowning in it. Old emotions resurface: rage, guilt, sadness, fear. Your mind says, I thought I healed this. But you didn't. You transcended it intellectually, not emotionally. You climbed into the light before you ever made peace with the dark. And now the darkness wants to be integrated, not defeated, not purified, integrated. The reason you lose motivation after awakening is because the ego that once pushed you forward has lost its grip, but the soul hasn't yet fully embodied its power. The bridge between them is shadow work. You cannot create from wholeness if half of you is still denied. The parts of you you've hidden contain the very energy you're missing, your creativity, your vitality, your courage. They are all locked behind the walls of repression. Until you face the shadow, your light will always flicker. Shadow integration is not comfortable. It begins with honesty. You must look at yourself without filters. You must admit the ways you've lied, the times you've manipulated, the envy you've denied, the resentment you've spiritualized. It's not about judgment, it's about ownership. Every piece of you, even the ugliest, deserves to be seen, because only through seeing do you reclaim the power hidden inside those wounds. You start to notice how much energy you've spent pretending to be good. How much of your kindness was compliance? How much of your compassion was fear of conflict? You begin to understand that love isn't the absence of darkness, it's the courage to bring awareness into it. To say, yes, I am capable of cruelty. Yes, I have hurt. Yes, I have hated. And still I choose to stay conscious. That's where transformation begins, not in denial, but in radical acceptance. The shadow holds all the qualities you disown to fit into the world. Maybe you were taught that anger is dangerous, so you became passive. Maybe you were told desire is sinful, so you learned to suppress it. Maybe you were shamed for being powerful, so you learned to be small. But what you repress doesn't disappear, it becomes distorted. It leaks out through anxiety, addiction, burnout, and lack of purpose. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim the raw, wild energy that got buried beneath those distortions. Real motivation returns when you stop trying to be pure and start allowing yourself to be whole. The fire you've been missing lies in the emotions you've been afraid to feel. Anger, when integrated, becomes power. Grief becomes compassion. Fear becomes intuition. Shame becomes humility. Every emotion carries a sacred intelligence, but only when it's embraced consciously. When you run from it, it controls you. When you face it, it frees you. This process isn't about healing one time and moving on. It's cyclical. The shadow reveals itself layer by layer, each time demanding deeper honesty. It shows up in your relationships, your work, your body. Every trigger, every conflict, every disappointment is a mirror reflecting what still lives unintegrated within you. The world doesn't attack you, it awakens you. Each external challenge invites you to meet another piece of your unconscious self with awareness. In facing your shadow, you may temporarily lose your sense of identity. The person you thought you were starts to unravel. You realize that even your spiritual self was another mask, a new role crafted to avoid pain. You see that light without shadow is just illusion. True awakening is not about transcending the human experience. It's about embodying it completely, with both its chaos and its beauty. Only then does your energy return, because you are no longer at war with yourself. The journey into shadow demands compassion. Without it, self-honesty becomes self-attack. You must learn to hold yourself with the tenderness of someone meeting a wounded child. Because that's what the shadow is. The abandoned inner child who learned that parts of themselves were unlovable. You are not battling darkness. You are welcoming it home. Every time you hold your pain with love, you become more integrated, more alive, more whole. Motivation begins to reappear subtly. Not the frantic motivation of the ego, but the steady flame of the soul. You start feeling pulled toward creation, not pushed by insecurity. You begin to act from authenticity, not approval. This new drive feels peaceful yet powerful. You're no longer chasing fulfillment, you are expressing it. The energy that was once trapped in repression now flows freely through your being, fueling everything you do with depth and sincerity. Integration transforms perception itself. You stop dividing the world into good and bad, light and dark. You begin to see that everything, pain, joy, anger, peace, is part of one divine process of evolution. You stop rejecting half of life. You stop rejecting half of yourself. You become less reactive because you're no longer fragmented. The outer world becomes calmer because your inner world is no longer split in two. When you face your darkness, you reclaim the power you once projected onto others. The people who triggered you lose their hold. The patterns that once drained you begin to dissolve. You stop seeking saviors because you realize the light you were chasing was hidden in your own shadow all along. Every confrontation with darkness becomes a return to strength, a remembering of your infinite capacity to hold it all. Real motivation, the kind that doesn't burn out, arises from this integration. It's no longer about achieving, competing, or proving. It's about alignment. You move because life moves through you. You create because creation is your nature. You no longer need to escape the darkness because it's part of your foundation now. It fuels your light instead of fighting it. The deeper you go into shadow, the brighter you become, not because you avoided darkness, but because you learned to include it. There comes a moment on the spiritual path when everything you used to believe about power collapses. You realize that all the striving, all the chasing, all the restless ambition that once defined your life has only taken you further from yourself. You've tried to force growth through effort, to manifest your purpose through constant movement, to control life by doing more. And now, you are exhausted. You reach the edge of your willpower and find that it no longer works. That's when the deeper lesson begins. True power emerges not from chasing goals, but from inner silence and alignment. Stillness is the forgotten source. It is not the absence of motion, but the presence of awareness. It's the space between thoughts, the pause before every breath, the calm beneath all noise. When you finally stop running, when you stop trying to become and begin to simply be, something profound begins to awaken inside you. It feels like nothing at first, like emptiness, like loss. But it's not. It's the return of your original power, the kind that doesn't depend on effort or achievement, the kind that simply is. You have been taught your whole life that success is born from struggle, that you must constantly move, plan, and push to create the life you want. But the truth is reversed. Everything you chase runs from you because chasing affirms separation. Stillness, on the other hand, is union. When you stop reaching outward, life starts to move toward you. What belongs to your soul finds its way into your hands without resistance. The deeper you surrender to silence, the more aligned your external world becomes, because your inner frequency is finally in harmony with truth. The world worships movement. We are addicted to progress, addicted to noise, addicted to distraction. We think rest is laziness, silence is emptiness, and stillness is stagnation. But stillness is not passive. It's the most creative state in existence. It's the field where energy reorganizes, where intuition speaks, where divine timing is born. When you stop interfering with life, life reveals its natural intelligence. Every river flows effortlessly toward the sea because it doesn't question the current. You are that river. The more you struggle, the further you drift from your natural course. The rebirth through stillness happens when you've finally exhausted the illusion of control. You realize that your mind, no matter how clever, cannot outthink the infinite. You stop trying to bend reality and begin to listen to it. You begin to trust the rhythm of things. This trust is terrifying to the ego because it thrives on activity. It believes power is in doing, not being, but being is where all doing arises from. The tree doesn't force its growth. It expands naturally in alignment with the light. The same force that moves the seasons is the same force that moves through you when you stop resisting. In stillness, you rediscover your essence. The noise of identity begins to fade your roles, your titles, your plans, your fears. Without them, you realize you've never lost anything real. You've only been buried beneath layers of noise. Beneath all of that is a consciousness untouched by failure, unshaken by change, unscarred by time. It is infinite awareness, the you that has always been here. That realization is the beginning of true rebirth. Rebirth doesn't come through effort. It happens when you let go of everything false. When the striving mind surrenders to silence, the heart begins to lead. And the heart doesn't chase, it allows. It doesn't fight for attention, it radiates. In stillness, you begin to feel that life itself is breathing through you. Your every action becomes an expression of presence, not pressure. You stop asking, "What should I do?" and begin asking, "What wants to move through me right now?" That question changes everything. When you move from alignment rather than ambition, your actions carry a different frequency. They no longer deplete you, they sustain you. They no longer create anxiety, they create expansion. You stop fighting for purpose because you realize you are purpose. You stop searching for meaning because meaning was never lost. It was just drowned out by noise. The silence reveals that everything you've ever been looking for was within you all along, waiting for you to stop long enough to notice. Stillness also confronts everything you've avoided. The moment you stop distracting yourself, your buried fears begin to surface. The ego panics because it cannot hide in silence. You start to feel the emotions you once suppressed, the loneliness you ran from, the anxiety you tried to fix. But this too is part of the rebirth. The stillness heals by revealing. It brings the unconscious into awareness, not to punish you, but to free you. Every feeling that arises in stillness is an invitation to meet yourself more deeply, to accept what you've rejected, to integrate what you've denied. The longer you sit in stillness, the more your perception changes. You begin to notice how energy moves through life without your interference. Flowers bloom without anxiety. The sun rises without planning. The heart beats without command. When you align with that intelligence, effort transforms into flow. You realize that creation doesn't require struggle. It requires surrender. The power that builds stars and galaxies is the same power that builds your path when you align with it instead of trying to control it. The rebirth through stillness is quiet, but it's also radical. It dismantles every illusion that your worth depends on what you do. You see that peace was never the result of achievement. It was the foundation of it. You realize that the people, opportunities, and experiences that align with your truth don't require force, they arrive through resonance. Life becomes less about chasing and more about allowing, less about building an image and more about embodying essence. The more silent you become, the louder your intuition speaks. And slowly, motivation returns, but not the kind you once knew. It's not frantic or fearful. It doesn't come from pressure or comparison. It comes from clarity. It feels natural, organic, inevitable. You move because movement arises. You speak because words flow. You create because creation wants to express itself through you. You no longer live as a separate self trying to control life. You live as life itself unfolding in perfect rhythm. The stillness that once felt empty now feels full. Full of presence, full of meaning, full of invisible guidance. You begin to sense a quiet intelligence orchestrating everything, and your only job is to remain aligned with it. you realize that the deepest power doesn't come from effort, but from openness. That silence is not the opposite of movement. It's the source of it. Every goal, every dream, every act of creation is born from the stillness you once feared. The mind calls it nothing, but the soul knows it as everything. There comes a time when life stops allowing you to live as a copy of who you were told to be. Everything that once made sense begins to crumble, and what you once called success or security starts to feel hollow. The job, the relationships, the goals, they no longer fit. You look around and realize you've been living according to a map drawn by someone else, following rules that never belonged to your soul. That is when the call to individuation begins. It is the quiet, relentless whisper from the depths of your being saying, "It's time to rebuild your life from your soul outward, not your ego inward." This call is not a choice, it's a summons. You cannot escape it once it begins because it comes from the deepest layer of your truth. The ego resists because it thrives on familiarity. It wants identity, achievement, belonging, and control. It believes it can create meaning by arranging the outer world to match its desires. But individuation demands the opposite. It requires you to deconstruct everything false and let meaning arise from within. It is the sacred dismantling of who you think you are so that who you truly are can emerge. The process is not gentle. Individuation feels like losing everything you thought mattered. The relationships that once defined you start to fall away. The ambitions that once drove you lose their grip. Even your own thoughts feel foreign, as if they belong to someone else. You stand in a strange space between death and rebirth, not physically but psychically. The structures of your identity collapse, and all that's left is the raw silence of your own soul. This is not depression, it's purification. The fire that burns your illusions is the same fire that forges your truth. To rebuild from the soul outward, you must first face the emptiness within. Most people avoid it their entire lives. They drown it in noise, distractions, and endless goals. But the emptiness isn't your enemy. It's your doorway. It's the silence that holds your real essence beneath all the roles you play. When you stop running and turn toward it, you begin to hear something ancient, something alive. You realize that your life's direction was never meant to come from your mind's plans, but from the wisdom buried in your depths. Individuation means learning to trust that inner compass, even when it leads you away from everything familiar. The ego builds life like an architect using blueprints. It decides what should happen, what should exist, and how it should look. The soul, on the other hand, grows life like a seed. It unfolds from within, in its own time, guided by invisible rhythms. When you live from the ego inward, you are constantly trying to construct meaning. When you live from the soul outward, meaning reveals itself through experience. You stop asking, "What do I want to be?" and start asking, "What is trying to be born through me?" That question shifts everything because it places you in service to your own evolution rather than in control of it. But the path of individuation demands courage. It will ask you to walk alone for stretches of time. You may lose friends who can't understand your transformation. You may drift away from the environments that once gave you a sense of belonging. The old world will try to pull you back with promises of comfort and recognition, but something in you knows that going backward would mean dying inside. Individuation means choosing truth over approval, depth over image, and authenticity over imitation. It means saying yes to your own becoming even when no one else can see where it's leading. In the early stages, you might feel lost. You'll crave certainty and guidance, but no external authority can give it to you because this path is entirely personal. Teachers and books can point toward truth, but the realization must come through your own lived experience. That is the paradox. You awaken by walking your own way, yet every step feels like you are stepping into the unknown. The ego fears that unknown because it can't control it, but the soul thrives in it because that is where it expands. Individuation is the art of walking through uncertainty with faith in the intelligence of your inner world. As you continue, life starts to reorganize around your authenticity. The more you listen to your soul, the more your outer world begins to mirror your inner truth. People, opportunities, and synchronicities appear that resonate with your vibration. It's as if reality itself starts to align with your honesty. The more real you become, the more real your life becomes. But this is not instant. It's an unfolding. You must learn patience. You must learn to be still long enough for your roots to grow deep before your branches can rise high. Individuation is not about becoming something new. It's about remembering what you've always been beneath the conditioning. This journey also demands that you make peace with your shadow. The parts of yourself you've rejected, feared, or denied must be reclaimed. Every time you face a piece of your shadow with compassion instead of judgment, you reclaim lost power. Every time you integrate what you once hid, your soul expands. Individuation is not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. Wholeness means embracing your contradictions, your light and darkness, your strength and vulnerability, your wisdom and your wounds. Only by integrating all parts of yourself can you live from the fullness of your being. Over time, the external world begins to lose its power over you. You stop chasing validation because you no longer need it. You stop comparing because you've found your own rhythm. You stop fearing solitude because you've discovered the presence within it. What once felt like emptiness now feels like spaciousness. What once felt like loss now feels like liberation. You begin to see that every difficulty, every heartbreak, every disappointment was part of the alchemy that shaped your awakening. Nothing was wasted. Every experience was guiding you toward yourself. Living from the soul outward means creating from authenticity instead of ego. You no longer act to prove your worth. You act to express your essence. You no longer follow trends, you follow truth. You no longer seek to control outcomes. You align with purpose. This kind of living has a quiet power. It doesn't scream for attention, it radiates integrity. People feel it without understanding it. You become a mirror for others, a reminder that it's possible to live honestly in a world built on masks. And so, the call to individuation is not just about personal transformation, it's about collective evolution. When you live from your soul, you unconsciously give permission for others to do the same. Your authenticity becomes a signal in a world addicted to illusion. You become part of a deeper movement, the awakening of consciousness through human form. The world doesn't need more perfect people, it needs more real ones, and realness begins where imitation ends. You rebuild your life piece by piece, not through control, but through surrender. Every choice becomes a reflection of your truth rather than your fear. Every day becomes an act of alignment. Slowly, your outer life begins to match the shape of your soul. That is the reward of individuation. Not fame, not wealth, not recognition, but inner coherence. The peace of knowing that your existence is an authentic expression of your essence. The quiet strength of realizing that you are no longer living as a character in someone else's story. You are living as the author of your own.